So let's talk about multiplying decimal numbers. If you're here, you're trying to study for a retake or you're getting ready for an interim assessment, and those things are great. Remember, the more practice you have, the better you'll do. This might take a little while, so stick with me. I'm going to go through some simple numbers, and then I'm going to make them more difficult. The video might end up being a little bit long. If you want to skip to the 3-digit by the 3-digit number, go for it. It's about, I don't know, 8 minutes in. But I'm going to try and rush through these, okay? First things, let's start with the basics though. It doesn't hurt to review everything. This number right here says 2/10 times 4/10. Now, I'm writing them as fractions. You don't have to do this. I'm just writing them to illustrate to you, right? So these two problems should be exactly the same. And why I'm showing you this is that I want you to know when you multiply decimals, the first thing you do is you're going to multiply the 2 times 4. Just like we multiply these numerators, the first thing we do, 2 times 4 is 8. Boom. When we multiply decimals, 2 times 4 is 8. Boom. Now that's the hard part. The next part is just figuring out where the decimal goes, and that's the denominator part, right? So a tenth times a tenth equals 100th. So we should know our answer should be 800ths. So when I'm over here, I say, okay, 8 needs to be in the hundredths place. I know the hundredths place is the second place behind the decimal. So there should be a decimal, a tenth place, and 800ths. I'd fill that empty space in with a 0. And there you go. You have figured out the numerator, 8, and you figured out the denominator, the place value where the decimal goes. Okay, of course everybody wants to remember the shortcut, which is this, right? You can count the number of digits behind the decimals in the factors, right? One of these factors is 2/10. That has 1 digit behind the decimal place, so I write 1 decimal place. This factor, 4/10, also has 1 digit behind the decimal place. The 4 is the digit. And so I'm going to write down 1 decimal place. And some people call this the swing method or the hook method. They say you've swung out 1 decimal place, you've swung out another. That's a total of 2. So you come down here and you swing in 1, 2 decimal places, and it will put the decimal in the correct spot for you. I would much rather you remember this, that you're taking a 2/10, which is something that's kind of small, and you're multiplying it by a very small amount. You're taking 4/10, you're taking a fraction of a tiny number. So it shouldn't be a surprise to you that that number gets even smaller. It got smaller, right? A fraction of 2/10 is going to be small. Now, we all use the swing method in the end, right? It really helps with bigger numbers too. But remember, when you're multiplying a fraction of a fraction, you're taking a part, right? Like let's just say I have a fraction here. Here's 1/4, right? And I'm taking a part of it. Let's just say I'm taking a half, a fraction of 1/4. I'm just taking half of it. So it's getting smaller, right? Half of a fourth is even smaller. So don't be weirded out when you see your decimal numbers getting smaller and smaller. Okay, let's move on to one of the next problems. Okay, this will be a 2-digit problem, a 2-digit times a 2-digit number. Let's see where it is. There it is. All right, fantastic. This is 125 times 14, 125 tenths times 14 tenths. So I'm just going to throw it up here, 125 tenths times 14 tenths. Our first order of business is to multiply that numerator, right? So let's talk about that. It gets difficult when there's more digits, right? So what I need to do is think about it in parts. First part is going to be 4 times 125. I'm just going to work with this first digit first. The second part is going to be 10 times 125, right? And when I add them up, I will get 14. I should change the color here. I will get 14, which is really what I'm after, times 125. Remember, multiplication is like groups. If I have 4 groups of this and 10 groups of this, I add them together, I would have a total of 14 groups. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. Let me stop playing with the colors here. So here's the secret. I'm going to treat all of these digits as just single digit numbers, right? I'm going to think of this as 4 times 5, which of course is 20, and I'm going to carry the 2. And now I'm going to think of this as 4 times 2, not 4 times 20, right? But 4 times 2. 4 times 2 is 8, and I'm going to add in this number that I've carried over, right? 4 times 2 is 8, plus 2 is 10. And now I'm going to do 4 times 1. I'm not going to think of it as 100, I'm going to think of it as 1. 4 times 1 is 4, plus this number I carried is 5. All right, and that's what 4 times 125 equals. All right, now I'm going to use my eraser to do a little cleanup here. All right, we often use our erasers to erase our work, but we shouldn't do that. We're just going to use our eraser to clean up a little bit here. Now I'm going to do 10 times 125. So I'm not going to think of this as 10. I'm going to try and think of it as a 1, except for when I first start out. I need to remember I'm in the tens place, so I need to add a place value here, right? When I'm multiplying by the tens place, I want to start in this spot here. So I need to add that place value. And you probably know that. Whenever you multiply by 10, you add a 0. We should say adding a place value, though. And now we're ready to start. Okay, 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 2 is 2. And 1 times 1 is 1. Fantastic. Now I'm going to do that adding that I talked about. I'm going to add those two things together and get my numerator. 0. 5 plus 0 is 5. 2 plus 5 is 7. And 1,000 plus nothing is 1,000. And there's my numerator, 1,750. I shouldn't say and, I apologize. Now let's look at our numerator. A tenth times a tenth is a hundredth. So my decimal is going to go right there. So I see a tenth and a hundredth place. I could also do the swing method, right? There's 1 digit behind the decimal place, 1 digit behind the decimal place. That adds up to 2 decimal place values. 2 decimal place values. I'm not going to do the swing because I have all these things in the way here, but I would swing in 1, 2 place values. It's important that you remember that you start at the end. That's what this little dotted line helps us remember, right? The swing. Okay, great. And now for one of the reasons maybe most of you are here is how do you do these really big numbers, right? Big multiplication problems, 3 digits by 3 digits. There it is, right? Something like this. All right, now at this point, I'm not going to mess with the fractions or counting the decimal place, counting the denominator and the numerator. I'm just going to go ahead and trust that all of that works, right? I'm going to just say to myself, all right, let's do the numerator here. I'm going to do 6 times 125. And then I'm going to do the tens place. This is going to be 30 times 125. And then I'm going to do the hundredths place. This will be 200 times 125. And the reason I want to be explicit about those is that each one of these is going to require some different moves down here, right? When I multiply in the tens place, I'm going to need 1 0. When I multiply by the hundreds place, I'm going to need 2 zeros, 2 place values, right? Those, when I multiply something by 100, there's going to be 2 extra place values added. All right, let's go ahead and do it. Let's start with our 6. 6 times 5 is 30. I'm going to put the 0 here, and don't forget to carry the 3. 6 times 2 is 12. Plus my 3 is 15. Carry the 1. And finally, 6 times 100 is 600. But it's easier to think of it as 6 times 1 is 6. Plus this is 7. 750. All right, don't forget to clean house. It's important, right? Once things get to be messy up here, you start to make mistakes. And, you know, we all know it's terrible to get something wrong because of a mistake, because your paper was too messy. All right, let's move on to the tens place. Let's do 30 times 125. Remember, the first thing I need to do here is add a 0 because I'm multiplying by the tens place. All right, 3 times 5 is 15. I carry the 1. 3 times 2 is 6. Plus 1 is 7. And finally, 3 times 1 is 3. 375 with an extra place value. All right, finally, I am in the hundreds place, and this is why we're here. When you multiply by the hundreds place, you need to add 2 additional place values. Add 2 place values. Oh, I forgot to clean up. Don't forget to clean up. You get tired of adults telling you that? Clean up, clean up. It's important. All right, let's move back here. Now I'm going to do 2. Oops, let me undo that. get back to my pen. I'm going to do 2 times 5. 2 times 5 is 10. Carry the 1. I'm going to do 2 times 2. That's 4. Plus 1 is 5. And finally, I'm going to do 2 times 1 is 2. Adding all of these up should get me 236 groups of 125. All right, here, let's do it. 0 plus 0 plus 0, easy peasy. 5 plus 5 is 10, carry the 1. 14 plus 1 is 15, carry the 1. 5 plus 4 is 9, and 2. Great. Let's clean up these little arrows here. And I'm going to count my place values, right? I'm going to count my place values. I have 1. Get this right. 1, 2, 3 digits behind the place value. So 3 place values. And here I have 1, 2 digits behind the decimal. So 2 decimal place values. Sorry, that should be DP. And now I'm going to swing this down. 3 plus 2 is a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 digits behind the decimal place. Wow, that looks like a really weird number. When I multiply, I'm used to numbers getting gigantic, but this looks tiny. It looks like, I don't know, what does that say? 29500. 295 10,000ths? No, 100,000ths. Tiny. That looks weird, right? Well, don't forget, you started off with something really small, 125 thousandths. A tiny, that's less than a penny. That's a fraction of a penny. That's a small, small amount. And you multiplied it by about, well, 2 and 36 hundredths. Let's just round that to 2 for a second. Let's just think of it as 2. 125 thousandths times 2 would be something like 250 thousandths, right? If I take these off, right, I'm going to write it without this. I'm going to call that 295 thousandths, right? So 295 thousandths is not too far off of 250 thousandths. Right? So this is a good estimate. Why is this one smaller? Well, remember, this used to be, right? This used to be not just 2, but it used to be 2 and 36 hundredths, right? So if it was a little bit bigger, my answer would be that, right? So it looks tiny, but remember, multiplying fractions by fractions or decimals times decimals, things get really small. All right, go forth and multiply.